Lord bless you. My name is Pastor Harris Kekalides, and you're watching here in the program, Getting to Know Jesus. And someone asked the question, how can the Gospels be reliable if they were written so long after Jesus' death? All the Gospels were written before 70 AD. That is less than 40 years from the time of Jesus' death and resurrection, which is not that long at all. Jesus died around 29 to 30 AD. For example, in the Gospel of John, chapter 5, we read of a place that should have been destroyed if the Gospels would have been written after 70 AD. Because in the destruction of Jerusalem, it would have been destroyed. We read in John 5, verse 2, "Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool which is called in Hebrew Bethsaida, having 5 porches. Now this pool would have been destroyed if the Gospel of John would have been written 70 AD or after 70 AD. Now also we see, and Luke was a companion of Paul, and we see Paul quoting the Gospel of Luke in 1 Timothy 5, verse 18. Why is that so important? Because Paul died in 64 AD. So the Gospel of Luke had to be written before Paul's death at 64 AD. Paul states in 1 Timothy 5:18, "For the scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain, and the laborer is worthy of his wages." Now he gets that from Luke chapter 10, verse 7. "And remain in the same house, eating and drinking such things as they give, for the laborer is worthy of his wages. Do not go from house to house." Luke 10, verse 7. When it comes to the Gospel of Mark, Mark was with Peter in Rome, and Peter was one of the 12 apostles. We read in 1 Peter 5, verse 13, "She who is in Babylon, elect together with you, greets you, and so does Mark, my son." Babylon was another name for Rome in the first century. This is the amazing thing. This is not speaking about the Gospels are not written hundreds and hundreds of years after the events came to be. They were written by the men that were with Jesus and men that knew the people that were with Jesus, like Luke. So if people that was alive at that time, that was at Jesus' crucifixion, they could have said to the disciples, "Well, you wrote this in the gospel, and that is false. We know that Jesus didn't do that, but we don't see that. We don't see no book saying, oh, Jesus didn't raise from the dead. Jesus did from that time saying, Jesus did not do this, Jesus did not do that." No, we don't see that. And there are writings which could attest to the writings of the Gospels, that they were written by those who actually, the Gospel says they were written. Irenaeus, Papias, and others. Let's just name one person. Papias. Papias was alive from 70 AD to 155 AD. Not far from the writings of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And Papias says about Matthew in his fragments, "Matthew put together the articles of the Lord in the Hebrew language, and each one interpreted them as best as he could." And he says this about Mark. "And the publisher said this: Mark, having become the interpreter of Peter, wrote down accurately whatsoever he remembered. It was not, however, in the exact order that he related the sayings or deeds of Christ. For he neither heard the Lord nor accompanied him. But afterwards, as I said, he accompanied Peter, who accommodated his instructions to the necessities of his hearers, but with no intention of giving a regular narrative of the Lord's saying. Wherefore Mark made no mistakes in thus writing some things as he remembered them. For of one thing he took special care not to omit anything he had heard, and not to put anything fictitious into the statements, quote, post quote. So we have evidence, internal evidence, and out evidence that the Gospels were written by those who, it says, it was written by Luke. What does Luke says when he starts his writing about the Gospel of Luke? Luke speaks like which he did. Luke speaks like a historian. He gathered information from those who were there. Luke says in Luke 1, verses 1 to 4, inasmuch as many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of the things which have been fulfilled among us, just as those from the beginning were eyewitness and ministers of the word delivered them to us. It seemed good to me also, having had a perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write to you an orderly account, most excellent Theophilus, that you may know the certainty of those things in which we were instructed. Notice that he gets his information from those who were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word. This could be counted. This is historical. This is eyewitness evidence. This is good for even a court of law to prove it's true. Look at what John the Apostle says. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled concerning the word of life. The life was manifested, and we have seen and bear witness and declare to you that eternal life which was with the Father and was manifested to us. These are eyewitnesses. That's what John says in 1 John. He's declaring what he's seen, what he heard, what he's handled, what he's touched. We could trust the Gospels, that they were written by the apostles and not a later time. And it is reliable. God bless you, and I'll see you next program of Getting to Know Jesus.